this is Nick Hamilton, and this is Motorsport Radio.
Motorsport Radio.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Ray from the Kawasaki Racing Team.
Hi, this is Nick Hamilton.
Hi, I'm Jamie Chadwick.
Hey everyone, I'm Bradley Smith.
Hi, I'm Joanne Zacco.
Hi, I'm Bradley Wright.
Hi, I'm Seb Morris.
Hi, I'm Dan Linfoot from Honda Racing, British Superbike Team, and this is Motorsport Radio.
I'm a very small man. This is a very large chair.
This is Monday Motorsport with Lester Forbes on Motorsport Radio.
Hello and welcome to Monday Motorsport. My name is Lester. This is Motorsport Radio on a Monday, hence Monday Motorsport. So we are live right now, and on the show tonight we will be looking back at all the biggest things that happened in car racing, mostly car racing usually, as we have our own Superbike show on a Thursday live here on Motorsport Radio to digest and dissect everything else that happened on two wheels in motorsport. So on the show tonight we're going to be talking about what happened at Paul Ricard, particularly in Blancpain as well. This weekend it's happened, it was a big event, and we'll tell you all about it right here on the show. And also coming up, we will talk about European Formula 3 as well. Now, you might have took your eye off the ball a little bit with this championship. Don't worry though, because we will update you as to who's doing what, who the big people are, the influencers, the movers and shakers, the pole position men, and the Brits to watch out for, because it was a British-dominated weekend, and we'll tell you more about it later in the show. Also, coming up in the show as well, we'll be looking ahead to this weekend's British GT Championship. It's the jewel in the crown at Silverstone. Yes, it's the Endurance 3-hour event, the annual event, and we'll be talking about all of the biggest news stories ahead, including an interview with one man who's about to attempt a quite remarkable feat. He's going to be attempting to dive into one race in two separate cars, racing for two separate teams. Yes, his name's Matthew George, and we'll get him on later in the show to ask him exactly what he thinks he's playing at. So yeah, you did hear right. He's going to be attempting to do the race in two different cars for two different teams, literally jumping out of what, you get the idea. And we'll ask him what he's playing at, basically, and why, more importantly. So if you've got any questions for Matt George, who'll be on the show a bit later on, you can get them to us. It's at M Sport Radio or Motorsport Radio as well. Plus, we might also look ahead this weekend. Events that are happening in BTCC, if there's time, and a little thing called Formula 1, that's on as well this weekend. They're in Canada. But before all of that, please welcome on to Monday Motorsport this evening. It is our brilliant panellists, all the way from the internets. It's Dan Marr and Connor Jackson, our website editor. Hi, guys.
Good evening, everyone.
How are you doing, Lester?
So, Connor, how are you? Not seen you for a while.
I'm doing quite well. I suppose you guys last saw me at Snetterton and
last week.
Last week, actually.
Was it? No.
Yeah.
It's not been that long, Lester.
Okay. Okay.
No, the memory does go, I suppose. But it's all been a quiet week, really. I don't know about you, Lester.
Fair enough. Yes, that is true. Anyway, so yes, as Connor, I'll reveal what Connor said about where we're going this weekend just before the start of the show, anyway, for later.
It's already going well.
Dan Marr here with us, the Senior Operations Manager of Motorsport Media.
Operations Director of Motorsport Media is my official job title, and I'll thank you for sticking to it.
How is it this week, Dan?
It is this week. It changes from week to week, I suppose.
What's the news in operations this week, then?
It's all very busy.
Exactly. So what have you been up to?
Many different things. We've been planning vigorously as ever for tonight's show, so that's taken up some of my time this evening, beyond other various things. But otherwise, we've had a relaxed weekend for us, I suppose, not being at an actual race circuit ourselves for the first time in what feels like about a month or so, which is quite sad in ways and quite nice in others. But we've had some fantastic racing over the course of this weekend. Blancpain being, for me, a particular highlight because as we all know, I'm unashamedly a big fan of endurance and GT racing. But we also had Lots of different highlights. The Hungaroring action for both DTM and European Formula 3, which was very exciting. A few controversies along the way. I'm sure we'll discuss that later on in the show.
We will, yes.
Plenty of other reflections for this coming weekend. As you mentioned, Lester, the Silverstone 500 for British GT, the jewel in the crown, really, which has been on the calendar for a couple of years. The 3-hour endurance race is going to be a challenge for many teams, but especially for Matt George, who will hopefully, as you mentioned, be on the show later to discuss why he's doing 2 different races in the same race, both in an Aston Martin GT4 and in a Jaguar GT4 car as well. It's going to be a very busy time, literally running up and down the paddock in order to take on some different results. But
exactly what I just said minutes ago.
Exactly what you just said a minute ago. But
yes,
that's going to be a real challenge, but in the Invictus spirit, one would suppose.
Indeed, yes. Well, we like I said, and you just said as well, we will find out later in the show, within the hour, let's say. We'll give him a call and get him on the phone and talk to him, and I suppose he can introduce himself to us if you don't already know who he is. But first, it's over to Paul Ricard, Blancpain, this weekend, and Dan, you had your eyes all over it.
I had my eyes all over it, and boy, what a finish it was to have the race decided, the overall battle on the second last lap, on the last lap even.
Well, should we not skip the entire race? Well, I think just
of a 6-hour race, to have it decided on the last lap was absolutely phenomenal, and a fantastic 6-hour race as ever at Paul Ricard.
I do feel like you skipped an entire bit of the race there and just went to the end.
Well, the end, arguably the biggest story in the Blancpain race, but always full of very, very busy action. 52 cars took to the circuit at the start of the race meeting. Well, they had to have 2 starts, really, during the course of the race. The first lap, the race direction weren't happy with the start. They weren't in the right formation, or they weren't just quite lined up properly, and it's one of the things that the SRO have really clamped down on in the last couple of years. So they basically let them do another rolling green flag lap, but half the team, in fact the entire field, had powered off without the green lights coming on, and powered off, and about a third of a lap, the first sector, they were still racing side by side. Oh, sorry, I got absolutely heavy.
That's okay. He's got a dry mouth, and
yeah. The problem with having hay fever is when they mow the grass, my throat tends to swell up. So
that's okay. Are you comfortable now?
Not going well for me so far.
It's okay. I don't think anyone noticed.
That's apparently how bad the start was at Blancpain this weekend. It made me quite ill just thinking about it. But it was, they weren't lined up in the correct formation, so they sent them round once again to do another lap, basically being quite naughty, getting themselves into the correct position at the second time of asking. But then the Aston Martin, with Jake Dennis on board, from second place on the first row of the grid, just couldn't get away at the second start. Got a great start on the not start, but on the actual start, the car just struggled and lost a good 10, 15, 20 places. So Matt immediately had a few troubles, but let the McLaren of Ben Barnicoat, the Garage 59 car, immediately jumped into the lead, which it held for quite a while. But the battle always ebbing and flowing, with the example, the new Bentley Continental had been performing very well over the course of the race meeting. The number 8 and the number 7, there or thereabouts, which is a new chassis for this year, because they've done a lot of work in terms of the aerodynamics, drivetrain development, natural engine placement, because it's all based off the new road car. So there's still a few people race the Mark 1 Continental, we'll dub it, and the Mark 2 version being raced by M Sport as a development year this year, and they had some good racing. The number 8 had a few issues, including one of the lights actually being broken on that car for quite a few hours, because what they do, Blancpain have always tried to have a 6-hour race within the calendar, and for a long time, I think that was at the Nürburgring or a few other places, but it was meant sort of a season ending, a way to really end the season on a high, apart from the 3-hour races, and then of course the 24 hours of Spa, the total 24-hour race, which has always been the jewel in the crown of Blancpain GT racing. And then a few years ago, they said, well, actually, instead of having the 6-hour race after the season, after the big event has happened, we might as well use it as a warm-up for the 24 hours. So you can get a bit of nighttime running, you can get used to working later on within the evening and such like. So they thought that was a good idea when they moved.
And was it a good idea?
I think it is a good idea. It's great for teams to get into the swing of endurance racing, getting that nighttime running a bit early, because it's not something you can get an awful lot of. Even though there are championships where you can do it, Blancpain's such a competitive thing, you need to sort of experience it before you then go and do it at Spa, effectively having a dry run. And Bentley, for example, a big example of things can go wrong even in the 6-hour races, with a light broken on the number 8 car. Unfortunately, that retired about 40 minutes from the end of the race, which is a shame. I'm not sure what that was for, but the number 7 had a fantastic run up into second place. The Ben Barnicoat, the Andrew Watson and Cameron Leggera car, the number 58, in third place overall, which also had a great run. But the ML Frey Racing, and it's not even their Jaguar, it was the Lexus which they started to run this year. They've been developing that car for a few number of years now. And they've had arguably its most, it's not even arguable, it is their most competitive race over the course of the last few seasons. They debuted it in Blancpain in the Sprint Series back at Zolder this year, which doesn't really suit the Lexus. The good thing about GT racing, as is most multi-class racing, is cars don't always suit the circuits. We see this in British GT, for example. Last time out, Aston Martin, very strong at Stetterton, but the Lamborghini Huracans works very well at Alton Park. So the way that the spirit and the way these cars are built and the way they actually run are very different. So cars will suit different circuits. It didn't suit the Zolder circuit first time out. They've been gathering more and more data, the drivers getting more and more comfortable within the car, and ultimately the Marco C3 Christian Klein and the Alberto Costa car, the number 14, taking the victory by only 2.3 seconds. They've been closing down.
After 6 hours.
After 6 hours, there was, with 3 minutes left to go, a full course yellow, so they only had 3 laps to bring down a gap of around about 9 or 8 seconds. They brought it down up towards the Mistral straight and scene. They went side by side, and the Lexus took the lead with 5 corners of the circuit left to go. So a brilliant way to cap off the third round of the championship, and should give them a good indication of if the car could run a little bit more reliably in a 24-hour race setting. Of course, this is only a portion of what a 24-hour race is, but even running for that amount of distance in a race is a very good thing to see, because a lot of people didn't make it through. You know, there was only 39 out of the 51 cars which started the race, only 39 were classified, so it's a very difficult thing to do, to actually get a good result, difficult to actually get to the end of the race. So hats off for everyone who did. And it had been difficult for ML Frey over the last few years, where they've been developing their Jaguar to get it up to the most strong position, where that had been running again at Monza and also at Silverstone, been running fantastically. The Lexus getting up there now. So ML Frey really maturing in 2018, taking on some of the biggest works or pseudo works teams and some of the best Pro-Am teams over the course of Europe as well. So for a relatively small Swiss operation, which is for the most part privately run, no real manufacturer support, definitely not for the Jaguar, only a little bit for the Lexus, most of their focus is in the US. It's great to see that you can just turn up with a car you don't see as often and have a very successful result. And I suppose that's down as much to the fantastic running that Emil Frey have. It's down to the BOP, down to the organisation that SRO have to make sure everyone has an equal chance of winning. So there's a lot of different things at play to get the results we get in Blancpain. But we had 5-6 different marks in the top 6. We had the Lexus winning ahead of the Bentley and the McLaren, with the Mercedes, the Nissan and then the Audi over the top 6, all covered by about 54 seconds. It's a very good mix, and it's a very tricky thing to get the BOP right. But the only other thing we have to then consider is, has anyone else really been, I'm not going to say gaming, but have they been they've been sandbagging a little over the course of this race so they can get a more favourable BOP? Well, we saw this with Mercedes a few years ago, where they really took the kahunas at Spa a couple of years ago. But is this really what's happening? I don't think so at this point.
Are you alleging that's what's happening, Dan?
Well, it's been proven to happen in most BOP-based systems, and it's just a fact of life. So it's who's done it the best, we don't know. Audi haven't really been up there. They never seem to really work around the Paul Ricard circuit, but with the V10 in the back of it, it's a very strong engine, so it's a very good straight-line ability car. But McLaren, for example, having a really good run as well. They've had a lot more confidence in that car over the last year or so than they've had previously. It's going to be tricky to really predict what's going to happen in the Spa 24 hours. We've got Misano in a couple of weeks for the Sprint Cup, which will also see Christian Klein and Alberto Costa in the Lexus RCF. That's at Misano in Italy, so that will be another very tricky thing. But they all score towards the Blancpain GT Championship, but they don't all score to the Blancpain GT Endurance Championship. But it all works out quite nicely in terms of overall results for everyone, because you get equal opportunities to get points all over. Connor freezing on a particularly good frame there, but it's to be honest, I thought Paul Ricard was a fantastic race. There was so much going on over the course of 6 hours. We've got the total 24 hours of Spa in a few weeks' time as well. But ultimately, I think Blancpain has provided some fantastic action. And certainly, even to take the win, and we've mentioned this a few times, by as little on the last lap in an endurance race is something we aren't really going to see anywhere else.
It's more of a sprint finish, wasn't it? It was more than
it was a sprint finish.
Yeah. All right, excellent. Dan, take a drink. Well done. It just felt like you needed to have a quick drink of water. That's no criticism. But yes, the Lexus, as Dan mentioned, finishing in first place, ahead of the Bentley, McLaren and Mercedes, Nissan, Audi, and more Mercedes. But yeah, top six and loads of different cars. And it's good to see, isn't it, Connor? Such a wide variety of machines up at the pack.
It is, and I was very encouraged by the performance of a lot of the teams who have appeared to have struggled this season. Although Dan hinted at it a little towards the end, I was very intrigued to see the successive teams that haven't had any this season. Obviously, Dan did mention the great work of the Bentley earlier in the race, and obviously they were very unfortunate to lose out in the final 2 laps on that win. But it is worth noting that is not just it's not just their first podium of the year; it's their first points of the year in the GT and the Endurance series combined. And third place, the Garage 59 car, other than a single point they picked up at Silverstone, I think it was. They themselves have scored virtually nothing this season. In complete contrast to that, the 2 championship leaders coming into this round, the Belgian Audi Club Team WRT and the R Motorsport, the Swiss team, neither of them scored points at all in this round. Now, obviously, go on, Dan. And
I think to potentially add to the point you were making, they started in pole position. They started within the top 5. Both cars were in the top 10. And one of their cars was on the front row.
Exactly. The pace clearly was there from these front-running teams. It's not as if they've magically lost the ground or anything. But there is a part that you do consider these teams were holding back. The Audi team, I will point out most notably, they knew coming into this round it was very difficult for them to lose the championship lead. It would be very difficult for them to sort of drop far back in the championship, if drop back at all. And as it turns out, in the overall GT standings, they still lead, and I think they still lead in the endurance standings as well, if I'm right. So they knew coming into this round that it was all going to be plain sailing for them. I would be suspicious as anyone that said that was the full extent of the pace they could run. And I'm aware they did run into problems a little throughout the race, and maybe that will explain at least the Sunday's lackluster pace as opposed to the Saturday's qualifying pace. But there is notes to be taken about who was quick here, who has the endurance pace, and who was really just quick over the first couple of laps. I suppose the flip side of this is to say that actually these guys were quick. The Bentley and the Lexus were quick, and they were quick over an endurance period. The races we've had this season have been 3 hours long. Obviously, as Dan says, this is the 6-hour race, and we're building up to the 24-hour race. As much as I don't want to call the 3-hour race a sprint, it's certainly half the work of the Paul Ricard round, and maybe some of the front-running teams who had picked up those points earlier in the season are starting to struggle now the cars are being stretched longer than perhaps they were designed to do, or at least designed to comfortably do. And as much as I'm sure WRT have experience to handle that, I'd be interested to see our Motorsport and how they deal with the Spa 24 hours, whether they are actually competitive or it was just a very quick start to the season.
Well, I was having a look at the highest placed Brits, and more in particular, whom from the British GT Championship, who might have been racing, finished the highest. And I think Dan will correct me, certainly, or praise me if I'm right. But I think the highest placed British GT driver currently racing in British GT was Ben Barnicoat, finishing on the podium in 3rd place in the McLaren. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, so Ben Barnicoat races in GT4, 3rd place in the number 58 car.
Yeah. Of course, everyone knows that. But yeah, Ben did a fantastic job. And I think Adam Christodoulou, I believe it was Adam Christodoulou, finishing in 4th place in the Mercedes. And Matthew Parry finishing in 5th place in the Nissan GTR. Yep. And although Matt Parry doesn't race in British GT, I was just mentioning because he's a name I recognise and he's Welsh. Hello, by the way. But yeah, talking about what you mentioned, Connor, and those British GT drivers. Now, I'm going to get shot down in flames here, but could it be worth... Now, I know Silverstone's ahead this weekend, and it's the big 3-hour race, but could it be worth... Will we see, in the future, sometime, maybe a 6-hour British GT race?
I think some organisers would have to make a deal for that.
Dan Mar's like, no, never happened. You talk. You're such a fool.
It's too expensive for a national GT championship. For me, I feel it's too expensive to do such. And it's not like
there's
they
no
want
paupers
to do
in
it.
British GT. Sorry, but there aren't.
Well, no, but it's still comparatively more expensive to have cars to run for that long because you've got to have the spares. You've got to spend you've got to spend on the engine, on the gearbox, to make sure it's all refurbished in time. And one of the things we flagged up, sorry to interject here, Connor, I'm a bit of a naughty boy for that. I'll give you the air in a minute. But when the Autumn Park, after Autumn Park Race 2, when the whole flood washout thing happened,
yeah, it was abandoned.
It was around, it counted for points, so it happened officially.
Okay.
But when all that was going on, we actually spoke to Benjamin, who's the organiser of British GT, very briefly, as he looked very stressed and had to run off to a meeting somewhere. And he was saying they wanted to do a 3-hour race at Spa. They wanted to have a 3-hour race at Spa, but they couldn't justify it because of the cost. And it costs a lot of money to pay for the track time, to actually hire a track for that particular period of time, because you've got to pay for the maintenance of the circuit.
I understand, yes, Spa being a Formula 1 grade circuit is one thing, and running costs for maybe a 6-hour race there is at, it's as expensive as you're going to find anywhere in the world, probably. But somewhere like Alton Park or Snetterton or somewhere British, somewhere cheap.
You can't hold... The reason why we have split races...
I wasn't calling Snetterton cheap, by the way, but in comparison to Spa and the track...
The reason why... Snetterton already have a 24-hour race, as I'm sure we'll discuss very soon, but...
Yes, they do.
But first of all, the reason we have split races at Alton Park and Snetterton is because there aren't enough pit garages, so they can't have enough fueling rigs out to safely hold them all within the pit garages, make sure they're all lined up properly. So that's why they have the 1-hour races instead of 2-hour races. The only places then that you could feasibly do it is Silverstone, Donington Park and Brands Hatch. And then Brands Hatch is already marginal on pit boxes, because I think that's only got 35 or 36. There isn't that many. I know that some teams have to share. When a few years ago, when the Sprint Cup went and they had something like 40 odd entries, that was very tight for them indeed, which then means you only got Silverstone or Donington Park. Donington Park still doesn't have that many garages, but it's the only other place you could really do it. And that's still quite an expensive place to run. Okay. So you either have that or Silverstone. Silverstone, also a Grade 1 Formula 1 circuit. And it would be great. I'd love to see a 6-hour British GT race, but when you've only got 2 drivers in a car, I know last year Richard Neary brought in Adam Christodoulou, so him, Martin Short and Adam Christodoulou did 3 drivers in 1 car for the 3-hour race. But it's quite difficult to do 6 hours with 2 drivers. And
I get your point, and you make some good points, and I am a fool for suggesting it. I'm sorry.
You know what? I don't even think that's a stupid idea. I'd love to see a 6-hour race in British GT.
From a fan's point of view, yes, it's
from a fan's point of view, it'd be fantastic. But
I mean, Silverstone would be the most obvious place with the, anyway. But should we park that one? But the issue about having the drivers, or the lack thereof, in such a long race, could all be solved by people like Matt George, who will get on the show a bit later. Now, if you've not heard about what is happening at Silverstone in British GT, we'll tell you about it in depth later. But just to touch on it, Matt George, will be competing this weekend in the Silverstone British GT event over 3 hours, and for reasons he will tell us later, and for things that I'm not going to speculate about, he's going to be racing in 2 different cars in the same race.
Yeah.
That's right, yes, you heard me correctly. 2 different cars, 2 different teams in the same 3-hour race. We'll get him on to talk about exactly why. What's he playing at? And can he even do it? Is it too much for him? He will be coming on very, very shortly. Connor, did you have any final points on the old Blancpain thing?
I will just say quickly on the British GT suggestion was
stupid.
I do agree with Dan's point about lack of pit garages. Can I just ask Dan? I was thinking Croft. How many garages does that have?
I really don't think having GT3 cars at Croft would be a good idea.
Yes, let's get some Formula 1 cars at Croft.
Okay, fair.
When they redo the pits at Thruxton, then you might be able to go to Thruxton, but I really don't think we could do GT3 cars at Croft.
Okay, I'm just trying to think of where has pit garages, and I knew Thruxton definitely did not have the pit garages, but yeah. Anyway, but no, there's a reason that only the World Endurance Championship does 6-hour endurance races, and there's a reason that even the European Le Mans Series and Blancpain regularly have 3-hour races.
4-hour races for BLMS.
Yeah, okay, sorry, apologies, but there's a reason they don't extend them to 6 hours. Is, as like Dan says, these sorts of races do require more manpower, more money, more effort, more time, and yeah, for a national series, that is not feasible.
No.
Okay, well, that's me told. Well done. Thank you very much, panel. So, yes, still to come here on Monday Motorsport on Motorsport Radio. We will be, as I said earlier, talking to Matt George, getting him on from British GT fame this weekend. He'll be racing in 2 machines, 2 teams, 1 race. We'll be finding out exactly why. Plus, we'll be previewing the British GT Championships marquee event. Is it fair to say that? Their Blue Ribbon event this weekend at Silverstone. And also, British Formula 3 is really starting to hot up this weekend as well. It's another handful of races, including, again, an entirely reversed race, number 2. They've been doing it for many years already, reversing the top 8, as does other championships. But this year, as Connor attested to in his pre-season article, and why it would never work. But yes,
I have been told. Like I will admit right now on the show that 3 rounds into the season, I am being proved wrong, and I'm happy to be proved wrong in this circumstance.
Okay, but yeah, basically it works. It's worked so far, let's say, with the only exception of Rockingham, where it was very wet and they didn't entirely reverse but for safety reasons, because obviously the fast people are at the back and the lunatics are at the front, vice versa.
The lunatics are at the front. You can't. we're going to lose our media passes, Lester.
I say it with fun and affection. Anyway, but yeah, we'll be reviewing the Formula 3 Championship this weekend, and also we'll be on site at Silverstone to bring any big, massive developments from all the race winners, and we'll be back this time next week on the show to look back at what did happen, and we'll make some predictions, and we'll see if they all come true or not. And also, it's Connor's birthday this weekend.
It is.
It is, yes.
We'll also see how many Formula 3 drivers try to throw us out with the
well, I never said anything. I never identified anyone. Anyway, it's all part of the entertainment. That's what it is. Yes, motorsport ought to be fun, and therein.
Anyway.
So yeah, British F3 preview still to come. If we've got time, we might talk a bit about BTCC. I believe that might be happening. What did happen at the weekend was TCR at Brands Hatch. And also Formula 1 this weekend in Canada. That was a thing, and you can get in touch with us right now on the old interwebs to let us know your thoughts on anything that we're talking about tonight. You can disagree with myself wholeheartedly. Feel free to disagree with Dan Marr, but only agree with Connor Jackson, because he is the authority on single-seaters. He is the Motorsport Radio website editor.
He is.
High praise indeed. Anyway, so yeah, it's Monday Motorsport on Motorsport Radio, and yeah, we will talk now a bit about what happened in European, or the FIA Euro F3 Championship, because they were racing as ever on the same bill as DTM, which in and of itself endured a few big incidents in pit lane involving a wet, slippery pit lane. We'll ask questions and talk about whether it's safe for Formula 1 later. But F3 in particular, and it was the first time in a long time, I think, I might be wrong, that the Brits pretty much dominated the weekend. Start off with race number 1, Connor.
Indeed. Well, depending on your definition of Brits dominating the weekend, we have got to remember Lando Norris did win the championship last season.
Yes, well, I have a short memory, so you've got to bear that in mind. So,
okay. In terms of race 1, as it were, Dan Tickton was on pole, the British driver for Motor Park, from the Spanish driver Alex Palou, and a load of Prima drivers all lined up behind. And one of those Prima drivers, Robert Schwartzman, started what would become a race-long, a weekend-long actually, feud with Tickton. As heading into the first corner, it was quite wet and slippery, having rained previously. And Armstrong made the best start from 5th on the grid. He rocketed down towards the first corner and appeared to have the main line going through. Dan, though, wasn't particularly happy about going to give up his championship lead, and from what I can tell, the two drivers made slight bit of contact. I think some damage was made to Tickton's car, but he claimed it was nothing severe and continued on towards the end of the race unabated. Schwartzman, though, however, picked up an injury to his car, let's say, and unfortunately had to retire after 2 laps. He did switch to wet weather tyres in the hope that an alternative strategy would work, although eventually parked it up after 2 laps. So he was not very pleased with Tickton's progress on the first lap. Dan, though, broke away from the rest of the field and won quite convincingly that first race from another championship challenger, Guang Yu Zhou, one of the Prima drivers. Rounding out the podium was Schwartzman. I believe I did say Schwartzman was involved in the incident. It was Armstrong that was involved in the incident. I do apologise. It was Marcus Armstrong involved in the incident, not Schwartzman. Schwartzman was the one on the podium. But yes, it was a bit of a Prima domination up front behind Tickton, because obviously having taken the win, it was Zhu in second, Schwartzman third, Mick Schumacher fourth, and fifth went to Ralph Aaron as well, completing the completing the Prima list, as it were. From there, though, Dan was under investigation for his first corner incident, and although later he claims he didn't think that the incident needed investigating at all. He thought it was just another racing incident. His result was under threat for a number of hours until it was later resolved only later in the day, thanks to a stewart's inquiry. This obviously was not very happy for Marcus Armstrong, who was a little disappointed about the result, and apparently was a little. It was a little miffed going into second qualifying. Yeah, indeed.
Displeased.
Yes, displeased going into second qualifying later that day. Tictum, amusingly, had, like Zhu, had used up 2 sets of the 3 sets that the drivers are allowed throughout the weekend of the tyres in the first qualifying. So this left him with just a single set to set his fastest time in the third qualifying session. In the second and third qualifying session, I should say, with the grids for race 2 and race 3 being decided by a single lap, and I do apologise. The fastest time from qualifying 2 sets the grid for race 2, and the second fastest time for race 3. I do apologise there. Tictum, however, did face threat from another high-tech driver. This time it wasn't Palou, it was Enam Ahmed, who had a pretty anonymous first race in Hungary, only finishing 7th. However, he was certainly on the pace in the second qualifying, and although lined up second to Tictum for the second race, was on pole for the third race with Tictum alongside him there. Into the first...
Is this race 2? Are we in race 2 now?
I was about to say, going into race 2, Tictum did look the likely championship favourite to continue his now championship lead. However, he again failed to make the finish after I think it was a brake problem. I do apologise. It was a brake problem that occurred that he suffered at about the 4th or 5th lap. He had already lost the lead after the first corner to Ahmed, who went on to win the race quite convincingly, actually, from Armstrong and teammate Palou, who did round out the podium. And so thus the championship lead went to Ahmed. This obviously was very interesting for the championship in turns, because it meant 5 drivers had won from the first 5 races that season. And it was incredibly tight at the top. I think after the second race, there was only about 10 points separating the top 5 in the championship, which is incredibly close, especially for the European F3 series. The final race ended up just being a domination for Ahmed, with Tictum alongside him on the grid. He had the easiest run into the first corner, now not under threat from any rain that had since cleared, and simply drove away, winning quite convincingly over Dan, with Mick Schumacher this time rounding out the podium. But again, it was another first corner incident in the third race, this is, for Dan Tictum and Marcus Armstrong, with the Prima driver having again one of the fastest starts, and again the two made blows into the first corner. Ahmed didn't actually have the best start and dropped to third before then, but no contact between Tictum and Armstrong meant again Tictum survived, and again Armstrong was out for another race with a puncture. NR won, Tictum second, Schumacher third, and behind them it was a bit of a surprise order with some of the drivers, as a number of the front runners, including Palou and Schwartzman, all retired through various other problems with their cars and first lap drama. But overall, it was surprising after the hype and expectation that was the first race. It was a very mediocre and pretty set second and third race, in my opinion. The first corner was as dramatic as you expect it to be, but by the third race, I think the drivers had learned, and you could tell this by the fact we had to have a safety car at the end of the first lap in the third race, that the drivers knew the race would be set after that opening 5 minutes, and it might just be a case of the Hungaroring circuit. Obviously, the circuit itself does get a lot of criticism nowadays for not being a car-friendly circuit for overtaking and the like. And we did see this a little in the DTM that we obviously will talk about in a little while.
Traditionally, it always used to be that way, Hungaroring. was always a bit of a
bit trickier to make overtakes on.
Boring.
Because no, not boring.
No, I wouldn't say it was boring, but and single seaters do help alleviate that that boring factor, because it's a lot easier to overtake in a single seater car than it is a touring car. Traditionally,
really?
Well, traditionally it is. Yeah, I mean, look at the overtakes in the Euro F3 compared to DTM.
And the World or WTCR Championship also goes to Hungaroring with varied results. If you're not looking out for Norbert Michaelis, anyway. But I take your point. So overall, then, do you have any thoughts on what happened in race 1? Ari Ticktum and Armstrong, Connor.
This might just be a case of Armstrong's hot-headedness. After all, his results this season have been pretty success or bust. Let's say he's picked up a 5th, a 3rd, and a 2nd so far, and also 3 retirements. So that might suggest that his
win it or bin it.
It is a bit of a win it or bin it strategy for Armstrong, and as much as I can see that being a viable tactic for a 30 race,
it's a popular tactic for F3 drivers in general.
Yes, well, when it's a 30 race championship, you can afford to have a retirement or 2. It's not that. It's not that
dangerous, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. But it does say a lot where after 6 races, 2 rounds of the season we've had so far, the only driver to have scored in every race so far is Enem Ahmed, and he's the guy leading the championship. Consistency will probably end up winning this championship. Ahmed's double win in Hungary was the first time a driver had won back-to-back. The first time a driver had won 2 races this season. It's really been a surprise to see not just Ahmed's pace, but also the lack of pace from the people we expect to be at the front of this series. The Primas obviously have been strong, but they haven't been as dominating as they were, say, during Lance Stroll's day, where you had to be in a Prima to win the championship outright. I mean, Lando Norris did a great job of alleviating that duct last season with his run with the Carlin team. But even the Carlin teams themselves had a pretty dire weekend. It was, I'm trying to think, Deruvler only scored in one of the races, and I believe even the other Carlin drivers struggled with their results. It did mean it was a very good rookie result, obviously, for Ahmed. He extends his lead over Fenestraz in the Rookie Championship, as well as taking the lead of the overall Drivers' Championship.
Yeah, so that you have to give him great credit for that as well. And also, sorry to cut across you there, but time is quite short.
That's fine.
A special shout out, special mention as well to Ben Hingley as well, Ahmed's teammate in the high-tech car. Also, who did very well, although the race performances, he probably would disagree with that. And Ben, one to watch, certainly for the future. He will be right up there, definitely challenging with Ahmed by the end of the season. Of that, I am absolutely convinced. So, Hingley, another Brit, also racing in the European Formula 3 Championship. And both Ahmed and Hingley were both racing, if you didn't know, in last year's BRDC British F3 Championship, which we will get on to review later in the show. They are racing this weekend at Silverstone on the British GT bill, which we will get on to talking about right now as well. But thank you for that excellent roundup there, Connor. Let us know your thoughts if you did manage to catch any of the FIA European F3 Championship action, and you have any opinions on maybe Mr. Ticktum or Mr. Armstrong. Let us know. We, apart from Connor, don't really have that many views, if I'm perfectly honest, but we would welcome your views as long as they're nice and clean and we can read them out, because there are their children listening, you see, so we've got to keep it all clean and such. So
speaking of interaction, a big thanks to Shaka, who commented earlier on our Blancpain piece to say, evening guys, the Blancpain race on Saturday was an absolutely mega race, action from start to finish. My only complaint was the way they deployed the safety car to restart the race every time after a full course yellow. They did this even when cleared the track. In my view, this cost McLaren the race, even counting the penalty they got. Well, arguably it depends on how race control, and Adam as ever manning the race control very well. They had some quite tricky times, especially in the nighttime running when it was quite dark. They had a lot of debris, and I think the track surface was starting to break up slightly, which isn't a particularly good omen for the Grand Prix.
Challenging conditions, yeah.
In the not too distant future, but I'm sure they'll fix that. It's been very warm in Europe at the moment, so you can excuse that slight damage to the circuits. Okay. But yeah, it was quite tricky, and it's something you have to work with because the rules don't always go your way. We saw this. The McLaren penalty was a bit of a shame, really, as one of the McLaren mechanics, I was trying to intertwine the words there, had stepped over the white line between the actual pit garage and into the slow lane, which meant that they had a guy over the line when they shouldn't have had a person over the line, so they got a penalty for that, which is a shame. But the rules are the rules, and you win some, you lose some, and that's how they got their penalty, which ultimately lost them the victory. But the safety car decision, well, some of the occasions, I think it had to be done just to bunch the pack up a bit. I agree, some of the full course yellow restarts they needed to do, but they've had so much trouble with it at Silverstone and at Monza, then really they had no choice.
Let us know if you have the same opinions or any maybe different opinions on what happened at Blancpain. If you agree with Xhaka, give us a little comment in the comments box below. If it doesn't even matter if you're not listening live, then we would still like to get your thoughts. Over now to British GT. As I said, racing this weekend at Silverstone in the annual 3-hour endurance race. It's fair to say it is an endurance race. And one man who, as talked about previously, will be attempting to do something, depending on how you might see it, either he's either very brave or something else. But Matt George, if you've not heard, will be attempting to race the entire 3 hours in 2 different cars for 2 different teams. And he joins us on the line right now. Hello, good evening, Matt.
Hi guys, how you doing?
I'm well, thank you. You're live on Motorsport Radio. Thank you very much for coming on. So I suppose we should just start with the obvious question then, Matt. Why? Why are you doing this?
Believe it or not, you're by far not the first person to ask me this. I think it's a mixture of people thinking I'm mad and at the same time, I don't know, I think it's quite cool. So obviously I'm currently a mentor for the drivers in the Invictus Games racing Jaguar cars, helping for their recovery through sport. So they're all ex-servicemen who we've brought up from never racing anything before into what is quite a high national level in the British GT Championship. And I raced in the Super Racing Aston Martin in 2016 in my first ever season car racing. And James Holder, the guy who I raced with and the guy whose brainchild Invictus Games racing is, thought that it would be a fantastic idea to come back to the championship, and why not to Silverstone, as it's always a fantastic race. And second of all, prove that it's in the spirit of Invictus. It's not just we're doing amazing things with the guys. I'm trying to prove as a mentor that I'm equally willing to work as hard as those guys are coming from scratch. And yeah, it's going to be an interesting challenge. I drove both cars for the first time on the same day last week, and they couldn't be any more different.
Interesting.
So it's going to be a fantastic challenge, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yes, we'll say it's going to be a fantastic challenge. I was looking for the right words for it, but I'll take your words and say yes, a fantastic challenge lies ahead for you. I'm sure Dan Marr, British GT expert here at Motorsport Radio, has loads of questions for you.
Yeah, just a few. Hi, Matt. Just one of the things that has been the interesting story in 2018 has been the debut of the brand new Jaguar F-Type SVR, and I think you sort of being one of the 2 pro drivers within the team to try and develop 4 different drivers over the course of the season. How have you found, even in your career of having raced in quite a few different championships but not having a lot of car racing experience, how have you found that transition to becoming a mentor?
Yeah, well, obviously, like you said, I've only been racing myself since 2016, and I've never raced in anything other than Pro-Am, so kind of mentoring is kind of what I'm used to as such, especially in my previous line of work where I was the driver coach at Base Performance Simulators before I became a driver myself. So the teaching side of things actually hasn't been too difficult. The main thing to learn is kind of how all the different people work, and because you can teach everyone the same thing and only a couple of people will be able to take it on. It's taking what they need to know and putting it in a way that each individual person understands. This year has been a particularly large challenge in a car from scratch as well that's completely unproven. And I know there's a lot of other new cars in the championship this year, but I mean, if you look at the likes of the Mercedes and the Audi, they've been developing those cars for probably 2 years now, whereas we are in our 7th month only of this Jaguar project. And every weekend, every day in the car is a learning experience, as much for me and our other pro driver, Jason Wolf, as it is for our 4 Invictus guys.
And for a car that's only 7 months old, to be leading at Snetterton, even with the massive pit lane gaggle a couple of weeks ago, it was still a great thing for your team to see it leading in what was only its 4th race in anything, really.
Yeah, massively. I mean, the pit stop infringement was a huge shame. I think, to be honest, well, as you can imagine, we've done a lot of adding up since, and without the pit stop infringement, we could have still been on the podium, which for the guys at the team would have been absolutely outstanding. I mean, the whole team at David Appleby Engineering have been working, I don't joke you, 24/7, day and night, and to even see the car at the front was fantastic for all of them. It's just a shame that we didn't actually have the silverware to be able to put on the side and thank all the guys for all their hard work.
Nonetheless, though, to develop something like the Jaguar in such a short time frame, and with a mixed team of those who are not full-time motorsport professionals, some obviously the David Appleby Engineering also involved. For you, I suppose it must be a really nice satisfaction to see the car running so cleanly so early on within its life cycle. And you think Autumn Park, admittedly a challenge for the conditions, similar Rockingham, you had a few technical issues I believe there as well, but the first dry running you really had, and all of a sudden bang, the car was there. It was quick.
Yeah, I mean, I've been very lucky in that I'm the only person to this day who's been involved in the car from day one. The wet has kind of been a bit of an Achilles heel at the moment, but it's something that we're working on. I mean, the biggest problem with going away to lovely sunny Italy during the winter to get lots of running is that you don't run in the rain. So Alton Park was our first ever time in the wet, and as you can imagine, a car with such engine capacity, torque and horsepower that the Jaguar does, it's a bit of an animal even in the dry. So in the wet it's taking a lot of setup work, but it's something that, I mean, if you look at the difference from, say, session 1 at Rockingham to qualifying, we went from being 9 seconds off the pace to about 2. So the development is certainly happening, and happening very quickly.
One of the things you mentioned there was the size of the engine. I believe it's the 5-litre supercharged V8 in the car, and supercharged, you don't tend to see those on racing cars these days. How much of a challenge is that in engineering terms and drivability terms as well?
Yeah, so in terms of drivability, it's actually an incredibly easy thing to drive, in that the power is very linear. The only problem with that being is when you start to lose grip, i.e. when it's wet, you're getting all of your power instantly. through the nature of how the supercharger works. So setting up a car to be able to deal with that is quite difficult, and obviously to drive with. I mean, if anyone saw the onboard video that British GT posted from my lap at Rockingham, it's literally taming a wildcat.
A very good way to describe the Jaguar there. Now, there's already been a series announced for some of the older racing drivers. I think it was mooted as an over 50 thing, with a field full of Jaguar F-Type GT4 cars. McLaren are doing something similar with the 570S, but where do you see, from the team's perspective and your perspective, where this car is going to go? Is it going to do more with customer hands, or is it just going to stay with David Appleby engineering? Or
to be honest, that's a question that I think everyone, Jaguar, David Appleby, ourselves, we're all quite far away from being able to answer yet. The Series Elite thing for over 50s is it's a championship that will come about, and I'm sure will be absolutely fantastic. In terms of how far the car goes from there, to be honest, nobody knows. I mean, we're so early on in our development. When the car turns into a fully working, reliable GT car, then I'm sure the interest will come to spread further afield. But I mean, to be honest, right now we're so focused on getting these two cars, as they're the only ones in the world, to run properly in British GT, and hopefully towards the end of the season, maybe at Silverstone this weekend, who knows, we'll start to be able to show what the car's really capable of, because I don't honestly think we've fully extracted that yet.
And bringing it back to Silverstone then, you mentioned you're hoping to get the pace out of the Jaguar, which is the newest GT4 car on the package, but then you'll also be racing in the oldest car in GT4 terms on the package, in the Aston Martin V8 Vantage. And I think you sort of briefly mentioned earlier there'd be differences, but the characteristics of the car, how different are they?
If you look on paper, you'd say probably not that different. To drive around the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit, completely different. It's the nature of, as you touched on, old versus new. If you look at the modern day GT cars, they're a lot sharper, the aero is a lot more efficient. So it's two completely different cars. I mean, to be completely honest, they're really not comparable in terms of how they drive. But, you know, the Aston has been the only race car I've ever driven up until starting this Jaguar development. So driving that at the same time as my current car, I'm massively excited for. It's going to be a huge challenge, as much for driving the two different cars as the fact that I've got to drive for 3 hours straight. I mean, like, the pedal efforts in the car, the steering weights, in terms of the power steering, literally everything is different. So the fact I've got to make that transition between the two cars twice, so it's going to be a big challenge. But like I said, in the nature of Invictus, we're up for absolutely anything. So bring it on.
Excellent. And just one final question from me. I think Connor's got a few questions for you as well, so just hold tight for a bit. But what have British GT, the championship themselves, done to try and aid you and both teams to try and run the cars at the same time? For example, are you the two teams next to each other in pit garages, or are you going to have to run all the way down one Silverstone pit lane to get all the way back up again, or?
No, so the guys at British GT are incredibly accommodating. We've managed to get my two cars next to each other in a garage, which is going to save me an awful lot of time, especially as there's a good chance that the cars will be pitting on the same, if not very close to the same lap, with how it has to work for minimum driver times. So getting up and down the pit lane just wouldn't be feasible, really. They've helped us stay in touch with all the other teams on the paddock, because we've had to have special permission to be able to do this, because as far as I'm aware, it's the first time in British GT anyway that it's been done before. And obviously with the nature of Pro-Am, we're going to have to be ever so slightly offset in that, obviously in British GT, the amateur drivers, if you're in a Pro-Am car, have to start the race, but I can't start, but the AMs can't start two cars at the same time, because then when it comes around to the Pro session, I can't drive two cars. So we've had to have special permission to do that, but all the other teams on the grid have been massively accommodating, and I think they all appreciate that it's a really cool thing to do. It's nice to be able to prove that you can kind of do anything if you put the work in to do it.
Well, it's a fantastic message that's being put out there by British GT. Well, thank you for answering my questions anyway, Matt. If you've got any questions, if you're listening at home, do get in touch at M Sport Radio and on Motorsport Radio. We are live currently here on Monday Motorsport. Please do keep leaving all your comments. I believe Connor, though, has a few other questions.
Yes, just a few to quickly follow on, Matt. I hope you can hear me. You obviously mentioned that the two cars will obviously be side by side in the garages, and obviously they've been very accommodating for you. But for yourself, obviously, I know there's limits in things like in many sports car series around the world about how long a driver can be in a car for often safety reasons. Are you concerned, if nothing else, about fatigue, especially towards the end of the race? This is obviously a 3-hour stint that you will be doing at least most of the race for.
Yeah, so basically how it works is it's 4 45-minute stints starting in the Aston with a maximum of probably 6 minutes out of the car throughout the whole race. So you can split that into one stint being 41 minutes or whatever. And the longest stint I've ever done actually came in the Gulf 12 hours this year, which was 2 hours, and I'm not going to lie, I was absolutely shattered by the end of it. And I've got quite a lot of good friends who race in the Blancpain series, and as you're aware, a lot of them double stinted at the start of the race. And they were all saying they were knackered as well. So I'm not going to lie, there is a little thought in the back of my head that makes me a little bit nervous about it, but I've been preparing so hard with the guys at Boomerang Pro Fitness. I've got an amazing support team around me. I've got a good plan of what I'm going to do. I'm confident in my head of how I'm going to get through the 3 hours, not just in terms of driving, but I've got 3 pit stops to do in that time as well, so I can't afford any mistakes, and getting to the end as quickly as possible in both cars.
Fantastic. Also, you briefly mentioned there about the Gulf 12 hours. Now, as far as I'm aware, you won that race last year, didn't you?
Yes, we won it, yeah.
Obviously, I think that was your first Gulf 12 hours as well, so it must be a fantastic achievement to win what's such a prestigious event so early in your career.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, in 2015, I was only dreaming of being a racing driver, and then in 2017, I'm winning races at circuits like Abu Dhabi. I mean, it's nobody pinch me.
That was a GT3 car, I believe you were racing with the Gulf 12 hours, or no, it was a GT4. I do apologise, but obviously it was a very packed field, that race, and obviously dealing with night driving, etc. With the Silverstone race coming up, obviously there isn't as many cars on track, but there is a lot of pressure from the GT3s behind. Have you been in your early career, have you found it difficult to deal with the fact that there are faster cars on you with you on track, and you have to deal with the pressure from behind, or is that something you've managed to quickly adapt in these first few years of driving?
To be honest, it's something that I've never really thought about too much. Obviously, my first year of racing ever being in British GT, I don't really know anything that different. I mean, for sure, it's something that you have to think about, because it's such a massive factor. I mean, you can gain and lose such a huge amount of time in how you deal with the GT3 cars. And I've been very, very lucky in the short period that I have been racing to have opportunities in GT3 cars, so you start to understand the car's strengths and weaknesses, which I believe is a definite positive in that you understand where they're going to catch you and where they're not, and how to let them pass without losing any time. Because there's a lot of places and corners on circuits now where the GT4 cars have picked up so much that there isn't actually that much difference between the GT3s and GT4s. So being aware of that and being prepared for that when one's coming up behind you flashing their lights is definitely something that I think about, and I pass on to all the guys that were mentoring at the race weekends to think about before every race weekend, because it's so easy to win and lose a race in that.
Well, Matt, it's certainly been fascinating having you sort of explain exactly in depth as well, because I know there was a lot of people who saw maybe or maybe on social media GT Championship put this news out there and think, what? What's what's all this about? It's. I guess we'll just have to wait and see, because we will be there at Silverstone following your progress closely and trying not to bother you and confuse you and get in your way and accidentally making you dive in the wrong car at the wrong time. But I guess we'll just have to say, really, good luck. Because, as you say, I don't think, as you mentioned, I don't think anyone else in GT has tried this before. Maybe some historian is listening right now to this and they can set the record straight and correct us. But if you're going to be the first person ever in British GT to try this, then way to go.
Cool, thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you for coming on Motorsport Radio today.
Thank you, guys. Cheers.
Good luck, Matt.
And what a fantastic achievement! As you said, Dan, a great reason to do it as well, and raising extra awareness for the not only himself but as well for the Invictus Jaguar team as well, and for the championship as a whole.
Yeah, it's fantastic because the Invictus Games Racing set up for this year, James Holder. As mentioned, a big part of that whole sort of charity, the way they use sport to try and rehabilitate former service people. And it's great to see, like a few other now concerns in racing where they do this sort of thing, and it's great to see that it is being done and people are being supported through it and they're enjoying it. Because having seen some of the stories, read some of the stories online of a couple of the AM drivers in these cars who've been through what most of us could scarcely imagine, the situations, the thing they've been involved with, and it's good that they get their chance to do something they wanted to do. They've won competitions or they've worked really hard to get to where they are, and they're really enjoying what they're doing, and it's great to see sort of they do it with that fun. And I think the way that Matt's doing it is a symbol to show, look, you know, you guys and girls are putting in as much as you can and everything you can to do the best you can do. So here's my way of showing that I'm doing it as well. Here's my way of showing, look, we're all doing the same thing for the same goal. And I think James Holder really promoting that as well by just saying, look, do it. Let's see what happens. Because you don't know how it's going to go until you do it, do you, Connor?
No, you don't. And we obviously wish him luck with the feat of trying to do such a full stint, and hopefully we shouldn't get in his way too much when he's changing cars, let's say.
We'll go and bother him after the race, I think, once he's had a nice sit down and a few cups of water.
That's probably the best idea, yes.
I mean, to do a 3-hour stint, in effect, is what he really is doing, isn't he? Albeit sort of diving out and doing a Formula E style
car swap.
Dive into different cars. You're still doing a 3-hour stint, and what other motorsport do you do that? Because in other endurance series, you've at least got to have a break every. How often? What's the maximum driver time in WEC?
I think it's
2 hours. I think.
Yeah, well, when they have their 6-hour races, you can only really do 2 or 3 hours, but you have to split it out. Even for most 24-hour races, you can only really do a maximum of 3 or 4 hours, and then basically a break of the equivalent time to rest and let your body relax a little bit. So it's a very difficult thing to do. I know Creventic, for example, a few drivers do race in multiple cars, and they do a lot of driving in the race, but they're not doing a full race. but they're still doing a lot of hours. So it has been done sort of in racing before. You know, best examples going back
Formula
40 or 50 years ago, when drivers would regularly, when the Grand Prix were 3 and a bit hours long, if their cars broke down, they'd swap cars in a somewhat similar way to try and drive for as long as they can. It's all about pushing yourself. And I mentioned a very long time ago, some drivers at Le Mans, one of the reasons why we have maximum stint times is because one driver did, out of a 24-hour race, when they had two drivers entered, one driver did 23 hours straight. The only reason they couldn't do 24 was purely because
they fell asleep.
Well, no, they couldn't do. They couldn't. Even the regulations then said you couldn't do a full 24-hour race. So they just said.
Was that like, maybe like the Schumacher thing, where like you take your penalty in the pit lane? Was it on a technicality or something like that?
Yeah, it was basically a case of, well, you can't do the full 24 hours, so they had to get someone else in to do it, but they did 23 hours because they didn't want to not be in the car. It's fantastic what the human body and what we as racing people will endure and put up with, and it's one of the eccentricities of our sport, I suppose. It's fantastic to see because it is such a big challenge in terms of fitness, concentration, having a car to last a distance, but you don't see that very often, and it's a good challenge for anyone to do, and I wish them the best of luck, genuinely.
Absolutely, yeah. And it does also pose another question as well, which is unlike me to ask. But since special dispensation was given to Matt George to do this weekend, what else? What other driver/car combination would we also like to see? Maybe that's another topic for another day, perhaps. But certainly I know that in the Formula One world, there is much gossip about, well, yes, that maybe, people like Fernando Alonso would be able to do one race on a Saturday and do a different race in a different championship on a Sunday.
Well, it happened this weekend, for example. Le Mans Test Day. Le Mans Test Day. You had people racing in IMSA, you had people racing in Blancpain.
And it does happen on the GT Bill as well, with... I forgot the guy's name, but...
I think 2016...
Someone definitely did it last year in 2017. Yeah. They were racing on the BTCC bill, and then on one day, and then they came over to do I think he was in the minis or something, Ginetta or something.
I think that wasn't Paul O'Neill, was it?
No, I don't think it was. There was a big, a notable case in 2016 when they moved the Autumn Park round to the Maybank holiday, so the one that's just gone. And Johnny, because it was the Nürburgring 24 hours that weekend, so that Johnny Adam raced at the Nürburgring for the 24-hour race, and then came back via helicopter to go and race in British GT at Autumn Park. Didn't win on that day, sadly, but nonetheless, quite a tricky thing to do. But
so then, as time is washing away, unfortunately, as it usually does when we just sat talking, we should talk. I mean, we I guess previewed already a bit of the GT race this weekend, the 3-hour race. Connor, what might we be looking to expect? Is there anything at all any predictions that we can make about the weekend?
I think the best prediction for me is that TF Sport will not be too fussed about winning the race. That's probably
maybe has someone told TF Sport that?
Well, in terms of if their overall aim this year is to win the teams championship, as it were, then they've already got a 25-point lead in front of Barwell, who themselves have a good sort of at least a 20-point gap over ERC behind them. So it's fair to say that in terms of the GT3 championship, I think TF Sports will not be putting all guns blazing to make sure they get the most out of this round. Saying that, though, one team that is notably behind is Team Parker Racing. They've only scored 59 points this season, and it's been a bit of a dismal year in terms of results. I know last time out at
Snetterton... Rub it in, why don't you?
Last time out at Snetterton, it was an Aston domination, I think it's fair to say, even with the Jetstream, turning around the Barwell Motorsport in the closing minutes of the race and getting a penalty, perhaps quite justified as a result. No one could really touch the Astons, whether that be TF Sport or ERC. It was a case of these teams really pulling away at the front, and Team Parker Racing, with their connections, will certainly not want the Lamborghinis or the Astons to really pull out too much of a gap in this championship.
Dan, quickly, I say that as in briefly. Yeah. What, for you anyway, would be the things to watch? Who do you think might go well this weekend in particular?
So my brief points then. Aston Martin in the Blancpain round about a month ago won very convincingly around here. So they've had about a 15-20 kilogram increase in weight, but no other penalty. So I think the Aston Martins will be up there. Will it be a win for Jetstream Motorsport? It could well be. We just got to wait and see. Maxime Martin goes very well around here, but so does Graham Davidson in the McLaren he raced last year. TF Sport will be up there despite Connor's protestations, I suspect, because
I don't think they'll be slow. I just don't think they'll put 100% into the race with the knowledge that they've still got a few rounds to go and a comfortable championship lead.
Well, British GT, traditionally known as a very unpredictable championship, so you've got to bank points where you can, and I suspect I don't even know. I think Optimum Motorsport could be back up there with Flick Hagan, Johnny Adam. Johnny Adam does get on with the circuit quite well. Barwell need a decent result again. The 33, you mentioned the John Minshaw and Phil Keane car, always very, very quick. And the Lamborghini does suit Silverstone, maybe not quite so much as the Aston Martin. Bentley, if there's going to be an outlier, I think it's going to be the number 7 of Callum McLeod and Ian Loggy, who could take the victory as a bit of a dark horse. I think Vic Parfitt Jr. and Ryan Ratcliffe still betting in as a pairing in GT3, and the Bentley is probably one of the better cars around Silverstone as well. It suits the circuit so much better than it does Snetterton, where basically the big boat just can't put the power down. It was too tight at Snetterton for the car, but it should, as we've seen in previous years. Well, last year, Rick Parfitt won by over a minute with Seb Morris in the car. And Seb, Blancpain round a few weeks ago, also did very well around here. That's GT3 for me. ERC Sport and the Mercedes will be there or thereabouts. Same for the Nissan, but they've got to pick up more when everyone else's falters, because that's what they did and won at Rockingham to do so. GT4, I just don't know. I don't think it's really a Ginetta circuit, because it's a very, very quick circuit, very long straights. The Ginetta not really great in a straight line.
It also depends a lot on qualifying. Qualifying more important at this round in particular, doesn't it?
I don't think so.
No,
I don't think so either.
Silverstone's a much better circuit for overtaking than Snetterton, for example. It's a lot wider, and it suits the modern generation of GT3 and GT4 cars, where there's enough straight lines to use the toe to your advantage. There's places you can overtake around Silverstone. The traffic will be the biggest thing. There is going to be a planned increase in entries for this weekend. We still don't know quite the full entry list for this weekend, because there are still those last minute additions to the grid being put on. But all I know is in GT4, I think it will probably be a McLaren victory, probably from either the number 4 or the number 5 Tolman Motorsport car. I think Michael O'Brien could do it, because he's quite good at Silverstone, as we've seen over the course of the last couple of years in Formula Fords. But you can't discount the rest of the field, to be honest. It's a very difficult thing to predict, but I reckon Aston Martin in GT3, McLaren in GT4, that's only the way I'm going to say it.
I think it's worth pointing out, actually, that a very good result for Tolman this round and a poor result for Century or HRC in the GT4 class could effectively wrap the championship up for them. I think there's still a few points in it, no matter what.
It was very close between Callum Poynton and that pairing coming into Snetterton. I know it's closed up slightly, but the Ginettas never really suit Silverstone very much, and I think it will be all up in the air by the time we leave the championship. And I think points and a half at least for the 3 hour the Silverstone 500. So if nothing else, it just gives you that extra advantage to know, with just 3-4 rounds of the championship left to go, it's still going to be quite close.
You're right there, Murray. Certainly, yes, that'll be streamed live this weekend. All of it.
Yes.
All the, I think qualifying stream live.
Yes,
should be anyway. Everything. It's all online on the British GT Facebook page, on the British GT Championships YouTube page as well, and also you may also perhaps, depending, see a lot more of Mr. Ma as he delves deep, goes behind the scenes and uncovers stories and breaking news that you don't get to see on TV. There'll all be, well, some of them, all the best ones, let's say, will be posted probably, I'm guessing, on the British GT Championships social media accounts. You may have been familiar with the Flick Haig interview, in which comparisons were drawn with her winning or getting a pole position and winning the race at Alton Park, and people like Carmen Yorda who said that, to paraphrase what she said, that women can't drive, or they're not great at enjoy.
No, they were suggesting. Carmen Yorda was just suggesting that women wouldn't be capable to race at the top levels of motorsport, which, with the greatest respect, British GT isn't the top level of racing, but it's a good comparison because, you know, it doesn't really matter. A car doesn't care what gender you are, as long as you can put your right foot down where you need to and your left foot down where you need to as well, then you'll be quick, no matter who you are.
I could argue GT3 cars are the same all the way around the world, and a lot of the GT3 drivers are
the same around the world?
Well, yes. Some of the drivers we do have racing in the series are international stars, as it were, so you could argue.
Right, okay, so I guess we'll just update you as to what happened this time next week on Monday Motorsport, on Motorsport Radio, when myself, Dan, and if Connor's recovered from his birthday, we'll try and get him to
sunglasses on.
Exactly, be like, yeah, so Formula 3 then. Oh, just let me...
I don't know, I was asleep at the time.
Exactly, but yeah, it's Connor's birthday this weekend, so if you see him out and about at Silverstone, just yell happy birthday randomly at him, even if you don't know him.
He's 21.
Yeah, that'll work.
He's 21.
Yeah.
If you see Mr. Jackson walking around trying to interview a Formula 3 driver or whomever, just shout, happy birthday, Connor!
Yeah.
And then he'll just sort of turn away. He's very shy. Bless him. We love you, Connor. You're very shy, but he's 21. He's 21 this weekend.
21 years old and editor of the mighty Motorsport Radio website already. Wow, such prestige.
Well, you know, we achieve greatness at a very young age. We do here on the show. If you're looking at us thinking, I can talk better than these brats, then do get in touch. We're always looking for contributors, for writers and presenters and other people to make silly suggestions and silly faces like Mr. Forbes does so excellently.
It's fine, we've already got Dan.
Exactly, we have me. But we're always looking for more people to come and join our little community here on Motorsport Radio. We're always looking to expand our editorial team and broadcast team and just team of people.
If you're already if you think you've got what it takes, maybe you're already writing for, let's say, another website, or maybe you like to get into writing. You think maybe journalism is the way forward, and maybe you've got a massive big bag full of ideas and opinions. That is exactly the ingredients that we want right here on Motorsport Radio. Whether you want to be in front of the camera giving your opinions just like Dan and Connor here, or maybe you just want to hide away in the background and do some proper journalism on the website, for example, some proper hard-hitting investigative stuff, breaking the news and all, then get in touch with us at Motorsport Radio. Either way, social media, email hello@motorsport.radio, that's all fine. Yeah, so do that. We would love to hear from you. Do not be shy. No point in life. Don't hold back. All right. So philosophy hour over. This is Monday Motorsport on Motorsport Radio. My name is Lester. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we will continue next with some more previews about their motorsports and Formula 3.
Hi, this is Nick Hamilton, and this is Motorsport Radio.
Motorsport Radio.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Ray from the Kawasaki Racing Team.
Hi, this is Nick Hamilton.
Hi, I'm Jamie Chadwick. Hey everyone, I'm Bradley Smith.
Hi, I'm Joanne Zacco. Hi, I'm Bradley Wright.
Hi, I'm Seb Morris.
Hi, I'm Dan Linfoot from Honda Racing, British Superbike team, and this is Motorsport Radio.
I'm a very small man. This is a very large chair.
This is Monday Motorsport with Lester Forbes on Motorsport Radio.
Oh, Dad Bar, thank you very much. And yes, he is. He has a certain character, I'd say.
He is still here, you know.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yes. Well, when I can't see you, I just presume you're not listening.
Yeah.
It's like when you switch the radio off and you just presume that they're not still talking to themselves in the studio.
Yeah, they still are. We can't do these impressions. We'll get into real trouble if we do. So it says 2 community radio presenters here. Let's move swiftly on from our libel cases and on to some more previews of the motorsports then there on this show.
Said just like a true Alan Partridge.
Aha!
Exactly.
You know, there's a reason I keep quiet during these sections.
Anyway, yes, it's called a tenuous link, Connor. And this is it, I suppose.
You will learn. You will learn.
Thank you very much for sticking with us. If you're still, in fact, stuck with us, you've done well. Let us know if you are still tuned in. No, okay, that's fine. No, that's whatever. But yeah, analogies about radio presenters talking to themselves alone is very much true. So yeah, this weekend, British Formula 3 Championship, again at the amazing Silverstone circuit. And would you like to know, Connor and Dan, I've been having a quick check, would you like to know a roll call of the winners so far in the BRDC British F3 Championship?
Go on.
Okay. The names, and this is almost unbelievable. If you would have said pre-season who was likely to win in the first 3 rounds of the championship, I would have chosen maybe 2 of these names. Okay, so Linus Lundqvist won at least 3 races. Yes, he has won 3 races. Nikolai Kiergaard, both of those are fighting out for the championship up top. Then Kush Mayani and Tom Gamble. He won at, I think it was Rockingham, the first race. And also, Manuel Maldonado has won a couple of races as well.
2.
Exactly. So, those are your winners so far in BRDC British F3. Heading into the Silverstone round, another 3 races this weekend. Connor, what can we expect?
Well, by the sounds of it, Leicester, another win from Maldonado, but... but no, it's been a tense season so far, and Snetterton really highlighted that there are 3 drivers who are looking to break away at the front
so far.
Both obviously Lundqvist and Kiergaard you've mentioned, and Mayani, who did win the reverse grid race at Rockingham, has really come into his own. Second place, obviously, in the first race, Snetterton. Third place in the final race at Snetterton. The first and the third race had the same drivers on the podium, just in a different order this time, and it was very interesting to see the psychological battle now, but that's really starting to build up between Lundqvist and Kiergaard. Obviously, Lundqvist, the Swede, does lead the championship by 30 points, although that's largely down to the fact that he's yet to retire from any race this season. He did have a bit of a poor, relatively I should say, poor reverse grid race at Alton Park, in which he only finished 8th, although in doing so he gained 8 places from his starting position, so you could argue, as it were. But look, Kiergaard, though, has failed to finish outside the top 4. His problem, though, is he's retired from 2 races this season. And I think this consistency is going to be really what settles the championship now. Lundqvist could arguably settle into a bit of a rhythm now, just making sure he consistently gets the points, make sure he gets a good reverse grid race, and picking up the points in that situation, and he could probably just about scrape home a championship. Then again,
are you already writing everybody else off for the championship?
No, I'm not. I'm saying that Kiergaard really needs to look at alternative options and really make sure he consolidates the points, because in terms of raw pace, Kiergaard probably does have the speed over his Swedish rival. He's picked up more pole positions, although admittedly that is 2-1. In terms of pure race pace, I mean, he pulls away at least relatively at the first race at Snetterton and at the final race at Snetterton, Kjærgaard was all over the back of Lundqvist. So in terms of race pace, the Dane probably has a slight edge over the Swede, but it will be interesting to see what the Silverstone circuit does throw up, because unlike Snetterton, where it was very difficult to overtake, Silverstone is completely the opposite, one of the easiest rounds to take advantage, as it were. And I think this will really make the reverse grid race very interesting. Obviously, Manuel Maldonado has benefited from Alton Park and Snetterton's reverse grid, places where it is a little more difficult to overtake. But this could be an opportunity for one of the secondary drivers, let's say, so like Krishnaraj Mahadek, as we said, who did pick up his first podium last time, Maldonado, or even Billy Monger, to really pick up that crucial win of the championship in front of the expected top 3, top 4, even with Tom Gamble, that are starting to break.
Yeah, Monger's done a bit of testing at Silverstone, hasn't he? He's done quite a lot, I think.
But I say, in terms of testing, Monker has done probably more than most of the drivers on the grid, and he will definitely be one to watch. Jordan Kane also had a lot of raw speed at Snetterton, but his car, I think, let him down, I think is the correct word to say. At that circuit, he, as I think you yourself put it, Lester, he left the circuit with mostly a different car than he started with, from when they started on Friday, and he was very quick, one of the top 3 runners. Kane gradually struggled throughout the weekend, and although he did pick up a 4th place in the first race, with only managing 8th in the final race, proving he was perhaps not on as much on the pace as he wanted, especially from someone who did win 3 races last season and had the pre-season testing gone his way. He probably could have been in a much better position to even fight for the championship this year, but situations are as they are. Obviously, similar things can be said about his teammate Jamie Chadwick, who herself has had a bit of a torrid start to the season so far. She did pick up that podium in Alton Park,
yes,
and that was a fine example of her driving through the field, but she is going to have to repeat that at Silverstone if she is going to move back up into contention, because she does languish now down in P10, which I think is a similar position to where she was last season. So her lack of progression, you could say, in terms of championship position is something that she'll be very determined to put right. And moving into this second half of the season now, this could be a real opportunity for her to pull ahead and, like Jordan Kane, make themselves known at the front of the grid and really upset the championship battle even.
Very valid points there, Connor. And if you're tuned in, listening live, and maybe you have any predictions about what might happen, do you think it could be another Maldonado victory in one of the races this weekend? Could happen, definitely.
We promise we're not Maldonado shills.
I've always liked Maldonado, even when
Lester doesn't deny it.
No. If there's criticism to be had, I'll always point it out, as some drivers know. But in general, I do want everyone to do really well. And if I see one particular driver getting an unfair amount of criticism, particularly from WTF1, because they were involved in a thing and their name's Maldonado, for example, then I generally tend to sort of go against what the popular opinion is, just because their name is Maldonado, dismissing the fact that actually they probably are a very good driver. And it turns out to be that he is a much improved driver from when he started at the start of last year. So, yeah, he's already picked up 2 wins, albeit in race 2, but still, you've got to finish first. Well, you've got to finish to finish.
First, you have to finish in order to finish first.
There you go. Yeah, you know what I mean.
Here's a question from one of our dear listeners. Blake Gibbons has commented a few things about some of the points we've been saying over the course of the show.
All right.
But the latest point was saying, Tom Gamble, should his potential climbing through the BTCC support races? So, and this is now a interesting question, as Tom raced in British Formula 4, powered by Ford, part of
no.
Okay, so Tom,
he was in Ginetta Juniors when he won the title there last season.
Okay, so he was in Ginetta Juniors last year. My apologies. Do you feel like maybe going into Formula 4 and then Formula 3 would have been a good step? We see this with Tom Canning, who came up also from Ginetta Juniors last year into British GT in GT4 this year. So does it feel to you, maybe, Connor, as our resident single-seater expert, like Formula 4, especially in the UK, especially not you, especially in the UK, is becoming more and more like a discarded option?
It's not a discarded option, no. But I will say I do back Gamble's decision to jump straight to F3. You look at his running mates this year, for last year in the Ginetta Junior Championship, the guy who won the rookie standings, Kieran Jewis. He has stepped up to British F4 this season, and he's immediately one of the front runners. I think he's only like 2 or 3 points off the championship lead. That means for Gamble to have gone straight to F4, he would have had to have not just beaten Jewis, but considering Jewis is one of, if not the quickest driver in the field right now, effectively win the championship. You can't really go into a championship and to come out with anything less than the championship win is considered a failure. That's concerning for you, and it doesn't really represent a forward step. This was a forward step for Gamble. It's a brave one, admittedly, but although last time out in Snetterton it was probably a bit of a disaster by his own measure, his only one top 10 finish, but he still ranks 4th in the championship. He's the top British driver in the series, and a good round at Silverstone to reverse his fortunes, and he could easily be back in the championship hunt. I talk about the breakaway 3 being Lundqvist, Kjærgaard and Miney,
and everyone else being secondary drivers,
but that's only because Gamble struggled at Snetterton and dropped out of the points battle as a result.
He was technically disqualified at one of the races at Rockingham as well, I think.
He was, but but up until Snetterton, he hadn't finished a race outside the top 10, and that's obviously including the reverse grid races. He even finished that disqualified race pretty highly. It's just obviously his incident with Billy Monger took the latter out of the race, and as a result, he was punished justly. But Gamble does have a lot to learn in terms of his racecraft and single-seaters, and that has been proven this season. In the reverse grid races, he hasn't made up as many positions as Kjærgaard or Lundqvist have from their back-of-the-grid positions. But that doesn't mean to say Gamble can't improve, and while it will be a tough aim to win the championship this year, it's still a possibility, and if he can get into the speed towards the end of the year, there's no reason to suggest why he can't win, or if not, at least finish in the top 3.
Did we? I think we interviewed Tom Gamble at Alton Park, didn't we, Dan? I think.
As far as I can remember, I think we had a quick chat with him. Nothing sort of particularly in depth, because it was one of those first meeting of the year. It's always very busy, isn't it? And I think that's one of the things we will try and bring you this weekend at Silverstone will be a conversation with Tom Gamble. I'll add it to Trello. But yeah, we had a bit of a conversation with him, and
in
as
that
you
conversation,
say,
do you remember? I genuinely don't remember.
I know where you're going with this. Just
do you? Well, let me go there first before you say you were right about me going there. Do you remember if he said, or if he was asked why he went straight into F3 and not into F4? Did we ask him that?
Yes, we did, and it was the same reason that Jordan Kane gave us last year, which he felt it was a side step instead of a forward step, which controversial. But what do you do? Do you spend nearly £200,000 for a season or 2 seasons realistically in British Formula 4 powered by Ford, sponsored by whatever the really long British F4 with a really long name, or do you go into BRDC British Formula 3 as Tom's doing for 2 years, learn in the first year, because a Formula 3 car, they are quite different from a European F3 car, but probably won't be that different when it comes to 2019 with the whole regulation changes.
I think the general consensus of opinion, which is not scientific, but it's just what we've been going around and extrapolating from interviews with young drivers and recent F3 drivers, about why we asked them why they went straight into F3 and not F4, why they bypassed that like Tom Gamble did. and others as well. And the general consensus is that they liked the competitiveness of F3 more. I think that's a nice diplomatic
And I think they felt as well. They felt as well that it was a better value for money, because F3 is still the top line, the top bill alongside British GT. It's British GT and F3
which doesn't actually, technically, in my mind, in my small brain, doesn't make sense, because F4 is sold as part of the TOCA bill. Oh, you get live TV, albeit one race, maybe two if there's a red flag somewhere else. Yeah. But you get at least one race live on TV, on ITV4. It's going to be fantastic.
You'll get 52 million radio listeners.
Exactly. You get, hundreds of thousands turning
Genuinely,
up
that's what the prospectus says.
It technically does say that, yes.
It just does.
Tens of thousands of people there at a track, but yet still drivers, the one who are effectively the actual customers of the series, prefer to...
I think...
Do you know what I mean? There's a disconnect.
I will interject.
Go, Connor, go on.
I will interject and saying this comes down to the basis of cost versus exposure, and it briefly relates to a conversation I had with one of the directors of the Ginetta organisation, and I queried them about, well, you've got enough series, as it were, with the GT4 Super Cup and GT5 and etc. Why not just break away and make your own Ginetta package? You've got enough support, surely,
Seems obvious.
To make a Ginetta package. And the response was, well, no, there's enough exposure you have with the TOCA package and the sponsors that are willing to partner with you because you're on ITV, because you have that live coverage, and because you're part of the touring cars, which is well respected in terms of its promotion, if nothing else. That does give it the prestige, even if it doesn't have top billing like say British GT F3 does. And I had a similar situation happened with the minis when a conversation with a couple of the team owners saying they weren't fussed about being part of the TOCA package and they'd prefer to do to the British GT package because they said it gets them better billing to be towards. It's better for them to be towards the top of the billing as opposed to in TOCA where they're not.
Just another support championship.
They are just another support championship. Then again, on the flip side, some of the drivers I spoke to from the minis said they'd much rather be in something like, I say some, and I'm not going to name any names, obviously, but some said they'd prefer to be in something like Clios or or GT4s because for them, it's better exposure for them as a driver.
Yeah,
so
well,
it comes down to what's best for everyone at that particular time.
Yeah.
And at the minute, British F4 benefits from being on a highly televised package, while British F3 benefits from being as a top billing package.
And that's the most difficult thing for all of these categories, with stuff like the FIA Super License points, which whenever we end up talking about them, it just immensely frustrates me because it's just so restrictive. But my feeling is yes, British F4 gives you the Super License points and you get to be on the TOCA package, but does it really develop you as a driver? They've already got too much grip for the power they've got. It doesn't teach you necessarily how a car will react, because Formula 1 cars don't have an immense level of grip. They have a lot of grip, but the grip to power and the grip to weight ratio is much higher, and it's a much more narrow band, like in Formula 3. The drivers often talk about how they have to really learn how the car can move, how it controls, how it powers. The dynamics of a racing car at speed are more representative in something like a Formula 3 car necessarily than a Formula 4 car. And yes, it is good. I know some, like Harry Webb, for instance, has done bits of F4 before, and it's helped their profile to be recognised as a driver. But realistically, how many drivers on the TOCA package are going into the top levels of motorsport now? Lando Norris, yes, is a fantastic example, and there's been a few up there now. I know believe he did a bit of F4, but then they've done F3 as well. They did F3 at the same time or above it to then get the experience they needed.
I think the thing you mentioned about Norris loops back to the beginning of the conversation we were having about Ginetta Juniors and Tom Gamble's progression, which is Norris started out his career in Ginetta Juniors, and with him now on the brink of F1 and looking at his career progression, there is a lot of the young drivers are looking at Ginetta Juniors now as the logical first step into racing, not just tin top racing, but a potential single-seater. Yeah, a potential career, because you can go from Ginetta Juniors into a single-seater series and be successful. And whether that single-seater series is British F4 like Norris did, or whether it's British F3 like Gamble is doing now, will be developed over the next few years, and we'll see what the most popular route is.
Well, I suppose, yes. And it might also be a factor that the top of the, if there's a perceived pyramid, or if there was one in motorsport, i.e. young drivers, single-seater drivers all want to get to Formula One, maybe that is starting to melt away, and people like Tom Canning now, for example, just one example, and yes, there's other things mingled into that decision as well, like budget or lack thereof, as is always the case, but there's definitely, for my impression anyway, a distinct lack of drivers who are all solely focused on getting to the top, i.e. Formula One, and a lot of people coming out of karting going maybe straight into Ginetta's, doing a year or two there, maybe a Ginetta Juniors, and then deciding to go and aim for a career in motorsport, i.e. GTs. Yeah,
well, this is, for me, I feel like it's got two fundamental problems. If the FIA didn't bother with any of this super license nonsense, then it wouldn't be an issue, because drivers could go and do whatever they want and get to wherever they want. If you start to close in stuff like pyramids, if you don't have,
I think it's more to do with costs, to be honest.
It's not more to do with cost, though. It's all about where you're getting the points from, because you can't qualify to go into Formula One via an alternate route. Pascal Wehrlein and Paul di Resta, who won DTM before going into Formula One, you can't do that anymore. It doesn't give you enough points. You have to go and do other stuff. So you have to go into Formula 3 and then Formula 2, and then you've got to hope that you can get the backing, and then you've got to get the super license points, because it doesn't even necessarily reflect that element of luck which so many drivers have needed to get into Formula 1 these days. It's all about, well, if I can afford to put you through F4 and F3 and F2 and then into Formula 1, that structure works perfectly, but you can't do any alternate sideline stuff. Like Alex Brundle, another perfect example, Dino Zamparelli, who have done loads of single-seater stuff.
There, right?
And the point I'm making is they've done loads of single-seater stuff, loads of GT stuff like a Le Mans as well.
Well, that's when the landscape of motorsport was a bit different.
Well, why have we changed it? Fundamentally, what has it done?
Because of Verstappen.
I'm sorry, but that's a facile argument. I'm sorry, let's just end that there.
No, the entire pyramid was brought, not the pyramid, but the entire point system to get into
the whole point system
because of Verstappen, the Verstappen effect.
But they did it in such a frustratingly arrogant way. It restricts so many options for young drivers coming into the sport and doing other things. I'm sorry, it does, because how can you get picked up by, like, for example, you've got this brilliant generation of British and European drivers in Formula 2 right now, and we are in a great series where they've got Jack Aitken, you've got George Ross and the likes, who've all got works backing, but they're being pushed into there, and they can afford to go into there, like Lando Norris. But if you had the likes, say, of Dino Zamparelli, who maybe, if he was a few years younger and in a similar position, Dean Stoneman, another good one, well, you used to be able to go and do World Series by Renault, for example, and because you didn't have the Superlife stuff, you could just jump into a Formula 1 car. You did well. Carlos Sainz, perfect example. World Series by Renault, did really well. Again, Brendan Hartley didn't do quite so well, but the opportunities were there. You had the opportunities for the likes of Jaime Alguersuari. You had it for...
these are all going back before the Verstappen era.
Yeah, because you can't do that now. What's the point? You can't do that now. You've had drivers who've been able to get into Formula 1 by going through a different path, by doing different things in the sport, experiencing different things, and then coming up into the pinnacle of racing. But you can't do that now because of the super license points, which restricts you. So you have to go down this convoluted route. And ultimately, we've seen with the likes of the Formula 4 cars, which are overgripped, arguably underpowered and overgripped for what they are, international Formula 3 and regional Formula 3, whatever that's going to become, if that becomes in a very similar situation where you can't learn that much about a driver, it's that progression, because drivers used to say, well, GP3 and F3, they prepared me in different ways. You could do both things at once. You could do GP2 and World Series by Renault to get into Formula 1, but you're restricting people into doing one thing, and if that's not the way they learn ultimately how to do it, and they don't get the points to do it, then you can't give them a trial to go into Formula 1. You can't give them a trial to say, look, we're going to take a risk on this guy or this girl because we can't risk it because they don't have the points, or they've got talent. Let's give them a shot. You can't do that these days.
Connor, you've heard what Dan said, and you heard what I said, and I'm sure you've got your own opinions. It begins with a sigh, but Verstappen has ruined all of motorsport. Go.
There's a lot to unpackage from what Dan has said, let's say. I will attempt to try and go over the brief points. Verstappen killing it? No. He's affected it, surely. And it was part of the influence, but I'd hardly call it all his fault.
The FIA certainly had a unfair knee-jerk reaction to presuming he wouldn't be good enough, therefore implementing this process. Then it turns out that he was good enough anyway, which he was. Yes,
but the pyramid was already being established by the time he got into F1 anyway. It's not like it was established just because he was there. In terms of the World Series by Renault thing, or 3.5 that Dan alluded at, the series was dying off in its latter years anyway, but by the time this was being introduced, the champion of 3.5 knew that winning the series was not good enough to get him into F1. Sure, back in Sainz and Alguersuari's day and even Vettel's day, it was a logical step towards F1, and I'll perfectly agree with that. But towards its final years, it wasn't.
People knew it was winding down.
But what's the argument? Part of that is because he wasn't given enough super license points. You restrict people. You can't force drivers.
No. I'm saying it was already on a downward trajectory.
It was already
by the time the super
on a
license
downward trajectory. Yes, but Carlos Sainz, when he won it, it wasn't that long until when it still had the Renault backing. Arguably, the super license point system is what was the final nail in the coffin for the championship, because then Renault went, well, we can't actually put our drivers into this, so why are we going to bother spending any money for anyone else? Because ultimately, we're not getting anything out of it.
Yeah, there definitely were some drivers who, on balance, knew they could get potentially more points in FIA-backed series versus, at the time, 3.5.
But is it even that GP2's provided that many really good top-level champions and drivers into Formula 1? Davide Valsecchi never got it into Formula 1, did he?
No, but how many top drivers do we even know that got into Formula 1? We always talk about, this guy will be a star of the future, this guy will be a future champion, this guy will... You look since 2005 even. When GP2 started, who from there has won a championship since then? Sure, Hamilton came up, Rosberg came up, and then Vettel came up from Formula Renault. So you could argue, two champions from GP2, one from Formula Renault, and the other champions we've had since then were already in F1 anyway, Raikkonen, Button, Alonso. Champions that we don't see them that often. They are very much a splash in the water. What you want to see is how many of the midfield drivers, where did they come from? What did they do? What is their background? Did the junior series prepare them for that? Because very often the future champions don't care about, the teams that are sponsoring these future champions don't care what series they do. They'll get them into F1 any way they want, and that they'll find a way to do that. And even now with the whole super license restriction, there's still a caveat saying that technically you could get them in if he does enough testing and he has enough dispensation from the FIA.
There always was ways around it with
there is a likelihood that even someone like, say, I don't know how much the audience knows about Formula 2, but someone like Sean Gallile would still probably get into F1 if he had enough connections, because he has done enough testing. He is part of his Red Bull associate. He's not a Red Bull junior driver, but he's a Red Bull associate, and he's got all those links. And he's been no way he's got any of the results needed. He's never won a Formula 2 race. He's never really won a lot in his young junior career, but he's got a lot of success and a lot of backing, and he still owns an F1 license. He could theoretically just turn up to an F1 race one day and be like, I'm gonna race, because the team puts that backing in him and has got him that license, irrespective of the results he's got.
Well, let us know what you think if you are tuned in live, as is Bonner Hingley, Ben's dad. Hello. Good evening. Thank you very much for tuning in, and to everyone else who's remained with us for the entire duration of the show. You are special people, I tell you that.
I like that you just stalk people consistently.
What?
It does not.
It comes up on your phone. So and so is tuned in live.
Facebook notifies you as to which friends you have in the chat.
It's not stalking. It's journalism.
Said immediately coming out of the courtroom after being acquitted of stalking charges.
Anyway, but yes, so we want to know your thoughts. Don't be afraid to dip your toe in the water of our opinion.
Jump straight in. We need more big bombastic opinions on the show. That is what we need. Exactly,
packaged in a Alan Partridge style way. So that just about really kind of almost puts a lid on the entire show, because we've hit 2 hours almost. But thank you anyway. I suppose there will be no end to that debate. It's an open-ended debate which we can go on for many hours, and we usually do. So I'll probably just cut it off there and say,
enough for tonight.
Enough. It's enough. Basically, but Connor Jackson, so this weekend you'll be at Silverstone reporting for the Checkered Flag website, and you'll be reporting on many different championships, won't you?
Yes, it's a very exciting weekend where again I'm left in charge of everything, so fantastic. But no, I will.
God, I've got to do everything.
No, but I will have some free time to come around the paddock and say hi to people. So if anyone does want to say hi, run into me, then you are more than welcome to.
Don't forget, it's his 21st birthday this weekend.
Please, everyone, forget this.
Wait, Saturday, isn't it? Your birthday?
Yes, it is.
If anyone, I'll probably be out on my slightly longer lens. So if anyone does bump into Connor and has a cake and lights it, I'll take some pictures to prove that someone has given Connor Jackson a cake. It's unlikely. We're not at Alton Park. Apparently Alton Park's got quite a big cake commentary based constituency. So,
and also, by the way, for any of the drivers from their race 1 and race 2, obviously you don't want to get your overalls soaked in champagne because you've got other races to get to, and plus it's a bit of a nightmare to get it out and blah blah blah. Feel free to share it with Connor in whatever fashion you wish.
Oh dear.
But yeah, excellent. So Connor Jackson, myself and Mr. Danmar will all be at Silverstone this weekend, and please come and join us as well to watch some amazing British GT action. Find out if old Matt George can actually do the business in British GT, and whether he'll just not pass out throughout his 3-hour stint, basically. I'm sure he won't. He's got the stamina to do so, and he did pretty well. Go on.
I say he's got 6 minutes to go and have some water and.
What if you need to wee in between the?
He's got 6 minutes over the course. Oh, okay. We don't tend to ask racing drivers this question because it's not a particularly pleasant answer.
Yeah, but you've got to think about it though, especially when you're trying to do. I mean, what if someone's already in there?
Well, that's the whole reason.
Silverstone has got toilets in the garages, so.
But not in the wing though. If they were racing in the wing, that'd be you'd have to go upstairs.
Well, no, but we're not racing in the wing. We're racing, and there are also toilets in the wing garages, so that also debunks that one.
Not in every garage.
Yes, there are.
There aren't.
Yeah, there are in splits of 2. There are, yes.
Yeah, but anyway, these logistical things have to be thought about. You see, these are very important things. Anyway. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Lester, and Connor Jackson and Denmar have all been part of the show tonight. And thank you to our special guests, and we will be following his progress through the weekend. And also, you can keep up with Connor Jackson's scribblings on the Checkered Flag website, which he still mysteriously writes for, despite being the Motorsport Radio website editor. That's
right.
Fine.
Let's move on.
I'm
Let's
very
move
good at
on.
math.
That's fine. I already embarrassed him last week when I won't go over that. But it is his birthday. I'll say happy birthday, Connor. Shall we all say happy birthday, Dan?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right.
I think I've certainly been mean to him enough now. So, Connor, have a good weekend, and we'll hear from you next Monday on Monday Motorsport, when you'll be talking BRDC British Formula 3 with Lester Forbes.
Indeed, and I'm sure I can have plenty of opinions on the actual racing on the track. So I hope to see you next week, guys.
And have a good weekend wherever you are, whatever you're doing, whatever you're watching on TV. We'll be back next Monday for Monday Motorsport, live on Motorsport Radio.
This is Monday Motorsport with Lester Forbes on Motorsport Radio.
I'm a very small man. This is a very large chair.